The cafeteria at Blackstone Prep fell silent as three bullies cornered Harper Sinclair, the quiet scholarship girl. Trays crashed, milk spilled. Everyone thought she was prey. But Harper whispered, 3, 2, 1. And in just 43 seconds the victim became the predator. A judo throw sent one flying. A brutal counter left another broken. And a spinning heel kick crushed the quarterback's ego. But here's the twist. Harper wasn't just fighting back. She was exposing a system. Every insult, every threat, every crime had been secretly recorded, ready to bring down the school's elite. By the time the FBI stormed in, bullies were on stretchers, the principal in handcuffs, and the silence of privilege was shattered. Backhand index pointing right, what would you do if power was used against you? Have you ever wished you could fight back like Harper? If this story shocked you, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share, because sometimes the hunted really do become the hunters. As the cafeteria at Blackstone Prep settled into a low hum of silence, Harper Sinclair sat alone in her seat, staring out the window. She had been on this campus for only 2 months, but already she felt like an outsider among her new classmates and their relentless bullying. The bullies were known to torment those who didn't conform to their narrow worldview, and today's encounter with 3 of them was no exception. Suddenly, Harper heard a loud crash in the cafeteria when one tray fell to the floor, causing milk to spew all over the table. Everyone crowded around her as she tried to pick up the spilled food, but each boy's hand shot out like sabers, trying to grab any stray pieces before they landed on her face. "Get away from here," Harper shouted, raising her arm with a sudden burst of energy that sent one of them flying backwards into another row. The other 2 bullies looked taken aback, unsure what had just happened, but their attention was quickly turned to the young girl as she struggled to regain control. "What's going on?" asked the quiet Jack, the jock who always seemed to be in charge at school. "You can't fight them like that," he warned her with a skeptical look. Harper raised an eyebrow, considering his words. She had never fought back before, but now she was starting to see it as a possibility. If power was used against you, what would you do? The thought crossed her mind like a lightning bolt, and for the first time in her life, she felt truly empowered. She didn't want to be another victim of bullying, so instead of trying to defend herself with violence, Harper knew that she had to expose this system. She couldn't let these bullies get away with their actions, and it wasn't just about the physical harm they were inflicting on her classmates. It was also about the way society treats marginalized groups. She looked around at the other students in the cafeteria, each one of them being a victim of someone else's power dynamic. Some felt threatened by their own insecurities or lack of success. Others struggled with prejudice and bias that led to discrimination and inequality. But Harper knew that these were not acceptable behaviors. They needed to be confronted. "Silence is not an option," she said, her voice strong and confident. "We need to stand together against this system, no matter how tough it may seem." The other students looked at each other, unsure of what to do next. Some felt scared or intimidated by Harper's words, while others were inspired by her courage to speak up for herself. "Maybe you don't like us," said the quiet Jack with a small smile on his face. "But we're here because we want it, and we won't let anyone else tell us what we can or cannot do." Harper nodded in agreement, feeling a sense of determination wash over her as she took out her phone and began to record everything that was happening around them. As the audio recording started playing back on the cafeteria speakers, Harper watched with bated breath as the bullies continued their attack. She could hear the sounds of shouting, slaps, and punches echoed through the room, each one more brutal than the last. But instead of simply ignoring it or trying to avoid these moments, Harper decided that she was going to take a stand. She knew that sometimes the hardest battles are fought in silence, but this wasn't an option for her. She had the power to make a difference if someone else didn't. With a deep breath, Harper picked up her phone and began typing out a message to one of her friends, explaining what was happening at Blackstone Prep. She explained how they were being bullied, who their tormentors were, and why it needed to stop. As she did so, the other students around her started paying attention to her actions too, some nodding in agreement with her words, and others expressing shock or disbelief. But Harper knew that these moments would only grow stronger if they were documented for everyone to see. And as she continued typing away, her message began to spread like wildfire. Wordlessly, the other students joined in, each one of them sharing their own experiences of being a victim of power dynamics at school. The conversation quickly evolved into something more than just two individuals trying to make sense of what was happening on campus. It became a collective effort to fight against injustice and demand change for all marginalized groups. As the recording continued playing back on the cafeteria's speakers, Harper watched with pride as her message reached even further than she had imagined. It wasn't until the last sentence that she realized just how far-reaching this system of bullying was, but it didn't matter. What mattered was that together they were making a difference in the lives of those who needed them. With one final shout, Harper turned off the recording and walked out of the cafeteria, feeling a sense of determination wash over her. She knew that she had just exposed a powerful system that needed to be stopped at every turn. But more importantly, she had shown others what it was possible to do when they stood together for what is right. As she stepped outside into the fresh air, Harper felt invigorated and empowered by the knowledge that someone out there could make a difference. She knew that this story would stay with her forever, as an example of how one person can use their voice against injustice and demand change in order to create a better world for everyone. But even more than that, she also realized that it was up to each of us, the individuals who had been bullied or marginalized, to take action ourselves. By standing together, we could fight back against this system of power dynamics at school, no matter how tough it may seem. And with Harper as an inspiration, we knew that anything was possible if we were willing to use our voices and make a difference in the world. Blackstone Prep, Harper Sinclair. Harper. 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 Oh. Harper. Oh. Oh. Harper. Oh. Harper. Harper. Harper Sinclair. The cafeteria at Blackstone Prep was once a bustling hub of activity, but today it stood silent as three bullies cornered Harper Sinclair, the quiet scholarship girl. Her eyes met them with determination and defiance, challenging their every move. Harper had always been an outcast in her school community. The other students whispered behind her back, making fun of her academic achievements and social status. But she refused to let it get her down. Instead, she used that rejection as motivation to push herself further, determined to make a difference and prove that she was worthy. As Harper stepped outside into the fresh air, she felt invigorated by the knowledge that someone out there could use their voice against injustice and demand change in order to create a better world for everyone. She knew that this story would stay with her forever, as an example of how one person can use their voice against oppression and fight back against systems that discriminate against them. But even more than that, she also realized that it was up to each of us, the individuals who had been bullied or marginalized, to take action ourselves. By standing together, we could fight back against this system of power dynamics at school, no matter how tough it may seem. And with Harper as an inspiration, we knew that anything was possible if we were willing to use our voices and make a difference in the world. Harper remembered her first encounter with these bullies, their taunts, jeers, and gestures that threatened to silence her every step she took towards standing up for what was right. She had never felt so vulnerable before, but it fueled her determination to fight back harder than ever. The bullies laughed at her, calling her names and making fun of her intelligence. But Harper refused to be intimidated by their words or actions. Instead, she stood tall, her eyes fixed on the ground as if daring them to take a stand against her. With each word that came out of her mouth, she became more confident in herself and her abilities. She told the bullies that they were not alone in feeling unwelcome, that there were others like them who refused to accept their place at Blackstone Prep. Her words resonated with the other students, who slowly began to take notice of Harper's bravery and courage. They saw her as a shining example of what it meant to stand up for oneself against injustice and demand change in order to make a better world. As they watched, Harper continued her fight, inspiring them to join forces and work together towards creating a more inclusive and equal school community. With the help of other students like her, Harper was able to expose the systemic issues that were at play within Blackstone Prep. She revealed that there were instances where teachers would belittle or humiliate minority students in favor of their more dominant peers, often with zero consequences for these actions. Harper knew that this wasn't just a matter of individual acts, but a larger problem affecting many schools like Blackstone Prep around the world. The system was built on power dynamics and privilege, where certain groups were given preferential treatment over others simply because they belonged to those groups themselves. Through her investigation, Harper uncovered evidence of discriminatory practices at school that went unnoticed by administrators and staff members. She presented these findings to the principal, who listened with empathy but remained steadfast in his commitment to maintaining a culture of inclusivity. The principal was hesitant to address the issue head-on due to and fear of backlash from some teachers or students within the school community. But Harper refused to back down. Instead, she pressed him on her findings and explained how these practices were not just an isolated incident, but rather a systemic problem that needed urgent attention. With her persistence and dedication, Harper lobbied for changes at Blackstone Prep, including revising policies and procedures around student behavior management, providing more resources for minority students to succeed academically, and implementing training programs for staff members on cultural sensitivity and inclusive teaching practices. The principal's initial resistance gradually gave way as he saw the value in Harper's approach. He began to work closely with her team to create a comprehensive plan that addressed the root causes of the problem at hand. Together, they launched an awareness campaign within school walls, educating students about diversity, inclusivity, and equal rights. The school also held open forums for feedback from both teachers and parents, where they could express their concerns and share their suggestions for improving the school's culture. As a result, Harper and her team received valuable input that helped shape the revised policies and procedures. With these changes in place, Blackstone Prep began to see positive results. Students who had previously been bullied or marginalized felt safer at school, with increased support from teachers and staff members. The discriminatory practices were no longer tolerated, and students of all backgrounds were able to thrive academically and socially. Harper's story inspired others within the community to take action against injustice in their own schools as well. Schools across the country began to adopt similar policies and procedures, implementing training programs for teachers on cultural sensitivity and inclusive teaching practices. They also launched awareness campaigns around diversity, inclusivity, and equal rights, educating students about these important concepts. As Harper continued her journey towards becoming a voice against oppression and demand change in schools, she knew that the work was far from over. There were still countless others like herself who faced similar challenges in their own lives. But with each step they took, Harper felt more empowered to stand up for what was right and make a difference. And so, Harper's story became not just about her bravery and courage, but also a testament to the power of unity and community in fighting against injustice and demanding change. As she looked back on those moments when she stood alone as a victim and fought back with others who had been marginalized, she knew that nothing was impossible if we were willing to use our voices and make a difference in the world. And so, Harper continued her journey towards becoming an influential voice for justice, inspiring countless individuals around the globe to take action against oppression and demand change. Her story may have started as just one girl standing up to bullies at Blackstone Prep, but it became something much more, a call to arms for all those who had been bullied or marginalized, calling them to join forces with others in their own communities and demanding equality for everyone. The cafeteria at Blackstone Prep was filled with a somber atmosphere as the students returned from their daily classes and went about their usual routine. Harper Sinclair sat alone in her seat, lost in thought. As she observed the other students, she couldn't help but notice how different everyone looked today compared to before. The once smiling faces were now replaced by frown lines and a sense of apprehension as they waited for lunch. Harper had always been an introverted person who preferred spending time alone, so it was rare that anyone noticed her absence in the cafeteria. As she sat down at a nearby table, Harper began to reflect on the events leading up to today's situation. She knew that the bullying incident at Blackstone Prep wasn't just about one student standing up against bullies. It had been an ongoing issue for years, with students from different backgrounds and social classes being targeted due to their perceived lack of privilege or status. But Harper was determined to do something more than simply report what she saw on her lunch tray. She knew that the system at Blackstone Prep needed reforming if it wanted to create a safe and inclusive environment where all students could thrive. As she thought about how to bring this issue to the attention of those in charge, Harper felt a sense of excitement mixed with anxiety. She reached for her phone and dialed the school's student services hotline. Her heart was pounding as she prepared herself for what lay ahead. She knew that reporting incidents like these could be seen as an inconvenience or even retaliation by some students who saw it as a threat to their power and status. But Harper didn't care about labels or perceptions. All she wanted was justice. As the line rang out, Harper's mind raced with possibilities. She imagined different scenarios. How might her story make headlines in the local news? How would other schools react if they learned of this ongoing issue at Blackstone Prep? And most importantly, what impact could this have on the lives of the students who had been affected by the bullying? Despite these concerns, Harper's determination was unwavering. She knew that she couldn't do it alone. There needed to be a collective effort from teachers, administrators, and parents alike. As she shared her thoughts with those around her, they began to share their own stories of similar experiences at Blackstone Prep. One teacher spoke out about how the bullying had left him feeling isolated and ashamed. He explained that he too was targeted by students who saw him as a privileged minority, but despite his efforts to seek help from school counselors and administrators, nothing seemed to work. Another parent shared their frustration with the lack of resources available for students in need, including mental health support and anti-bullying programs. As more voices began to come forward, Harper's resolve only grew stronger. She knew that it was time to take action. She reached out to local advocacy groups and organizations, sharing her story and offering help in any way she could. She organized a school-wide meeting with students, teachers, and parents to discuss the issue of bullying at Blackstone Prep and brainstorm ways to address it. At first, many were hesitant to join forces with Harper. They feared that their own voices would be silenced or ignored by those in power, who might see them as weak or unnecessary. But as they heard her passionate speech about the importance of standing up for what was right and demanding change, they began to realize that she wasn't alone. One student stood up from his seat, taking a deep breath before speaking out. "I'm here because I know what it's like to be bullied at Blackstone Prep," he said. His voice shook with emotion as he recounted how the bullying had affected him emotionally and academically. He spoke about feeling isolated and ashamed for being different, but also grateful for the support of his friends who stood up for him. "I didn't know what to do when I found out that my friend was being bullied," he added. "But with your help, we were able to start a conversation and demand change. We formed a group called the Bullying Busters and started spreading awareness about the issue at Blackstone Prep." Another parent shared their own experience of seeing bullying affect her child's life, highlighting how it had impacted their self-esteem and academic performance. They explained that despite seeking help from school counselors and administrators, nothing seemed to work, and that they felt like a failure as a mother. "Imagine being bullied at the same time you're trying to provide for your children," she said. "It takes a toll on both of them." As more voices came forward, Harper's determination only grew stronger. She knew that it was not just about silencing those who were already suffering. It was about creating an environment where all students could feel safe and supported in their own learning experiences. With the help of the Bullying Busters, they began to organize events and campaigns aimed at raising awareness about bullying and promoting empathy towards others. They organized school-wide assemblies, workshops on emotional intelligence, and informational sessions with mental health professionals to provide guidance for students who were struggling with feelings of anxiety or depression due to the trauma caused by bullying. As their efforts gained traction, Harper felt a sense of pride in what they had accomplished. She knew that it was not an easy journey, but she also knew that every step forward was making a difference. "Sometimes," she said, tears streaming down her face, "it feels like we're fighting against the tide. But I know that if enough people stand up for what's right and demand change, something will shift." As she sat in the cafeteria once again, Harper couldn't help but feel grateful for the support of those around her. She knew that her story was just one small step towards creating a safer and more inclusive learning environment at Blackstone Prep. But as she continued to inspire others with her courage and determination, Harper felt an even greater sense of purpose. For in this world where power is often used against us, it's moments like these when we can become the hunters ourselves, using our voices and actions to make a difference and create a better future for all. Int. Blackstone Prep Cafeteria. Day the cafeteria at Blackstone Prep falls silent as three bullies cornered Harper Sinclair, the quiet scholarship girl. The students' eyes locked on her every move, their faces etched with fear and disgust. Harper stood tall and proud in her navy blue blazer, a look of determination etched onto her face. She knew that she was not just fighting back against them. She had something to prove. As the bullies approached her, Harper took a deep breath, squared her shoulders, and addressed their leader. "What would you do if power was used against you?" The bully sneered at her, his eyes narrowing as he raised his hand. "I'll teach you who's in charge," he growled. Harper stood back, deftly dodging the attack with a swift kick to the stomach. But things only got worse from there. The bullies launched another attack, their faces twisted and contorted as they fought for control over Harper. She managed to fight them off one by one, her agility and quick reflexes honed through years of training at Blackstone Prep. But every time she thought she had won, the bullies would strike again, their determination only growing stronger. As the cafeteria fell silent once more, Harper couldn't help but feel a sense of pride in what they had accomplished. She knew that it was not an easy journey, but she also knew that every step forward was making a difference. "Sometimes," she said, tears streaming down her face, "it feels like we're fighting against the tide. But I know that if enough people stand up for what's right and demand change, something will shift." As Harper sat in the cafeteria once again, feeling victorious but also exhausted, a group of students walked by, their faces expressionless as they passed her on their way to class. Some looked down at her with disdain, while others nodded in agreement. "Harper," one student said, his voice low and weary. "We need more like you here." The words resonated deeply within Harper's heart, and she felt a surge of determination. She knew that change was not going to come overnight, but they needed to start somewhere. And so, with the support of her friends and peers, Harper launched into action. She organized an assembly at Blackstone Prep, inviting all students to attend and share their stories about the bullying incidents on campus. The event went off without a hitch, with over 200 attendees turning out to listen to the brave individuals who had spoken up for themselves and those they loved. As Harper spoke, her voice filled the room with courage and conviction. She told tales of how she had been bullied at school, how it felt like no one understood or supported her struggles, and how it led her down a dark path that ultimately led to self-doubt and depression. But amidst the tears and anger in their eyes, Harper's message resonated deep within them. "We cannot let our silence be an excuse for injustice," she said, her voice shaking with emotion as she continued. "We must stand up for ourselves and each other, no matter what it takes." As the assembly came to a close, Harper stepped to the microphone once again, addressing those gathered before her. She spoke of the importance of empathy and understanding in combating bullying, urging them to treat others with kindness and respect, even when they were being mistreated. To everyone's surprise, the response was overwhelming. The crowd erupted into applause as students hugged each other tightly, tears streaming down their faces as they thanked Harper for standing up for what was right. They knew that her story had sparked a movement within Blackstone Prep, one where they would continue to fight against bullying and create an environment of inclusion and support. With renewed energy and determination, Harper dedicated the next few months to organizing more assemblies at Blackstone Prep, sharing their stories, and inspiring others to speak out against injustice. She became known as a beacon of hope in a world that often seemed lost in its own darkness. But even though her journey was far from over, Harper knew that she had accomplished something truly remarkable. For through the bravery and resilience of those who spoke up for themselves and their loved ones, she had helped create a brighter future for all students at Blackstone Prep, where power could no longer be used against them or anyone else. And as she sat in her quiet classroom once again, surrounded by the sound of pencils scratching on desks, Harper couldn't help but feel grateful for the opportunity to make a difference. For in this world where power is often used against us, it's moments like these when we can become the hunters ourselves, using our voices and actions to create change and make a better future for all. The cafeteria at Blackstone Prep was still quiet as three bullies approached Harper Sinclair, the quiet scholarship girl. This time around, however, there was a twist to their confrontation. Unlike in her previous encounters with them, Harper wasn't just fighting back against power, but also exposing a system that had been quietly exploiting students for years. As she stood at the center of the cafeteria table, surrounded by a group of her fellow scholars who were equally shocked and outraged by the situation, Harper took a deep breath. She knew that this was not an ordinary lunchtime conversation, as it involved more than just discussing food or studying. This was about standing up for what was right and demanding change in the school's leadership. What would you do if power was used against you? The bullies asked, their eyes fixed on Harper with a mix of fear and determination. For many students at Blackstone Prep, this was all they knew, that when faced with injustice or oppression, they were powerless to defend themselves. They might have the right to attend school, but it didn't mean everything would remain unchanged. "I don't know," Harper replied simply, her voice barely above a whisper as she looked around the room for any allies who may be willing to stand up together against this system. But I've seen too much of what's happening here, and it doesn't feel right. Her words resonated with the other scholars in the cafeteria, their voices rising in agreement. They had all experienced firsthand how power can corrupt those in positions of authority, whether it be teachers or administrators who discriminate against certain students based on factors like race, gender, or socioeconomic status. I've seen it happen, a female student named Emma said. I remember when I was bullied for being different from the other girls at school, and my teacher wouldn't allow me to join clubs that were predominantly male-dominated. It felt like there wasn't anyone who could stand up for what's right. Harper nodded in understanding. She had been a member of several extracurricular activities back when she was in high school, but never quite found the courage or confidence to take a stand. Now, as she watched Emma speak, her own fears and doubts were replaced by determination. Power can be used for good, Harper said firmly, and I believe that it's up to us students to use our voices to demand change. We have the power to create a school culture where everyone feels valued, respected, and heard. It starts with each one of us standing together as allies for those who are being marginalized. The other scholars listened intently as Harper spoke, their eyes shining with hope and inspiration. They knew that they couldn't do it alone, but together they could make a difference. You know, said another male student named Jack, his voice firm yet vulnerable. We need to demand change from the top down. If we don't speak up now, who knows what will happen in 5 years or 10? Harper nodded in agreement, feeling a surge of pride and responsibility for her newfound allies. She knew that this wouldn't be an easy task, but she was determined to make a positive impact on Blackstone Prep. Let's start by forming our own group, Harper said, looking around the room once again. We can come up with a plan together to raise awareness about the issue and demand change from our school leaders. The other scholars cheered in agreement, their voices rising as they brainstormed ideas for how to organize this movement. From organizing protests or rallies at school events to creating social media campaigns targeting influential figures within Blackstone Prep's administration, Harper knew that anything was possible if everyone worked together. We need to make sure we're not just talking about the problem, Jack said, his voice resolute. We also need to educate ourselves and our peers on how this power dynamic works in real life. Harper nodded once more, her mind racing with thoughts of what they could do to affect change within Blackstone Prep's school culture. She knew that there was a long road ahead, but she was determined to make it worth the effort. We can't wait for someone else to shine a light on this issue, Emma said, tears in her eyes. We need to take matters into our own hands and show the world what we're capable of. Harper nodded once more, feeling a sense of pride and determination wash over her as she looked out at the group of scholars who were standing together, united by their desire for change and their commitment to making a positive impact on their school's community. As they walked towards the exit of the cafeteria, Harper couldn't help but feel grateful for this opportunity. For in that moment, she had found not just an ally but a sense of purpose. She knew that there would be challenges ahead, but she was ready to face them head-on and use her voice to create change. And so, with a newfound sense of determination and resilience, Harper Sinclair stood at the center of Blackstone Prep's cafeteria table once again, facing off against 3 bullies who sought to silence their voices. But this time around, it wasn't just about fighting back. It was about shining a light on an issue that had been quietly exploiting students for far too long. For through the bravery and resilience of those who spoke up for themselves and their loved ones, Harper had helped create a brighter future for all students at Blackstone Prep. And as she sat in her quiet classroom once again, surrounded by the sound of pencils scratching on desks, Harper couldn't help but feel grateful for the opportunity to make a difference. The Harper Sinclair sat in her quiet classroom at Blackstone Prep, surrounded by the sound of pencils scratching on desks. It was another day, and she had made it a habit to be there early every morning so that she could start her studies before the other students arrived. She loved studying, but today something felt different. As she read through her notes for class, Harper couldn't help but feel overwhelmed by a sense of unease. There was an underlying tension in the air at Blackstone Prep, and she knew exactly what it was: power, being used against them. For far too long, students had been silenced or bullied because they spoke out about issues that were affecting their lives. But Harper wasn't one to back down from a challenge easily. She knew that as someone who stood up for her beliefs, she could make a difference in this world. That was why she had decided to take action and expose the system of abuse at Blackstone Prep. As soon as class started, Harper took a deep breath and began reading through her notes on the issue. The three bullies who were tormenting Harper were known for their cruelty and manipulation, but what really caught her attention was how they seemed to have complete control over the school's administration. Harper knew that she had to be careful not to give them an advantage by sharing too much information or going against their demands. But at the same time, she couldn't ignore the problem any longer. The students who spoke out for themselves and their loved ones were being silenced because of fear of retaliation from the bullies, fear of losing everything they had worked hard to gain. Harper knew that this was her chance to make a change. She would take matters into her own hands by gathering information about what was happening at Blackstone Prep, speaking with teachers and administrators, and sharing her findings with the school's board of directors. But as she began to work on this project, Harper realized that it wasn't just about exposing the abuse. It was also about building a community of people who were willing to stand up for what they believed in. She met with students from different backgrounds and races at Blackstone Prep, sharing their stories and advocating for change. One student named Jordan stood out to her. He had been bullied by one of the bullies on campus, but he refused to let fear hold him back. Instead, he started a movement called Blackstone Progress, a group that aimed to raise awareness about the issues at hand and fight against bullying in all its forms. As Harper listened to Jordan's story and saw his passion for making a difference, she knew that this was what it took to truly make a change. She reached out to Jordan, and together, they began working on plans to gather more information and build support for their cause. The bullies at Blackstone Prep were not happy with the attention being drawn to them by Harper and Jordan's movement. They saw it as an attack on their power and tried to shut down everything that was happening. But Harper and Jordan refused to back down. Instead, they continued to gather evidence and share their findings with other students, teachers, and administrators. As more information came in about the abuses at Blackstone Prep, there were growing calls for action from across the school community. The board of directors made a decision to take immediate steps to address the issue. The first step was to hire an outside consultant to conduct a thorough investigation into the allegations of abuse and misconduct that had been reported by students and staff members. This would allow for clear evidence to be gathered and analyzed, giving everyone involved in this process a fair chance to present their case. As Harper worked on building support for Jordan's movement, she also took responsibility for implementing changes within Blackstone Prep to prevent future incidents of abuse from occurring. She implemented new policies around reporting and addressing bullying, trained staff members on how to identify and respond to reports, and provided resources to students who were struggling with the effects of trauma or mental health issues. The change at Blackstone Prep was not without its challenges. Some teachers and administrators were resistant to changes that threatened their power and privilege, while others struggled with the emotional toll of witnessing firsthand the harm caused by bullying. But Harper refused to let these obstacles get in her way. She knew that this was a long road ahead, but she was willing to do whatever it took to create a safer and more inclusive school for all students. As the investigation progressed, evidence emerged that showed clear patterns of abuse at Blackstone Prep, leading to calls for stricter consequences against those who committed these acts. The board of directors decided to hold an emergency meeting with both Harper and Jordan to discuss their findings and plan further action. They listened intently as Harper outlined her plan for addressing the issue, including changes in policies, training programs, and resources for students at risk. With a sense of determination and resolve, Harper stood before the board, speaking about how she would work tirelessly to make Blackstone Prep a safer place for all students, regardless of their background or social status. She acknowledged that change was not an easy task, but she refused to let fear hold her back. She also spoke about the importance of collaboration between schools and community partners in addressing issues like bullying and advocating for positive changes. She emphasized that Blackstone Prep needed to work with local organizations, law enforcement agencies, and advocacy groups to create a comprehensive approach to tackling this issue. In response to Harper's proposal, the board of directors agreed to take concrete steps to address the concerns raised by students, teachers, and administrators. They announced plans for increased funding for mental health services on campus, implemented new policies around reporting bullying incidents, and established an emergency hotline for anyone who needed support or resources related to this issue. As Harper stepped back from the boardroom, she felt a sense of pride in what they had accomplished. She knew that change was not easy, but it was possible if everyone involved worked together towards a common goal, creating a safe and inclusive school where all students could thrive and succeed. And with that thought on her mind, Harper turned to Jordan, who stood by her side as she walked out of the room, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. Together, they knew that their work was just getting started, but they were confident in their ability to make a difference for all students at Blackstone Prep. The Harper Sinclair had always been a quiet girl, content to study and excel in her studies at Blackstone Prep. But lately, something felt different about the school's cafeteria. 3 bullies were gathered around her table, their faces filled with intimidating glares and whispers as they taunted Harper for being too soft on them. "You think you can just walk away from us?" one bully sneered, his eyes narrowing in anticipation of a fight. "You're nothing but weak and spineless." Harper stood up straight, defying the bully's words with unwavering resilience. She knew that she had to speak out against their actions if she wanted to make change at Blackstone Prep. But speaking up was easier said than done when you were surrounded by peers who would rather see you fail. "What are they talking about?" Harper asked, her voice barely above a whisper as she reached for the salt shaker on the table next to her. Jordan, one of the bullies, stepped forward and placed his hand over Harper's shoulder. "We're saying that your school is too soft when it comes to dealing with bullying. You've been quiet before, but now you're starting to speak up about things we can't ignore." Harper looked at Jordan skeptically, unsure if he was speaking from a good place or just trying to provoke her. "What do you have evidence for this?" she asked, feeling the weight of his words pressing down on her chest. "You've never been involved in bullying before." Jordan shrugged and walked away, leaving Harper alone with the bullies at the table once again. She couldn't shake off their taunts and whispers as they circled around her, making sure to keep an eye out for any sign of weakness. It was clear that this wasn't just a random incident. These were real people who cared about what was happening on campus. But Harper knew that she had to take action before things escalated further. She couldn't let fear silence the voices of those most affected by bullying, and she needed to find ways to make Blackstone Prep safer for everyone. As Harper sat down at her desk in the library after school, she took out a notebook and began jotting down ideas for how to address the issue. She knew that there were many different approaches to tackling bullying, but one thing was clear: It had to be comprehensive if it wanted to make an impact. She started by reaching out to the guidance counselor at Blackstone Prep, who shared her concerns about the lack of resources and support available to students experiencing bullying. Harper asked for a meeting with them, hoping that they could provide more information on how she could help. The next day, Harper met with the guidance counselor in person along with three other staff members from different departments at Blackstone Prep. They discussed the school's policies around reporting incidents of bullying and their efforts to create an environment where students felt comfortable coming forward if they needed support. But it wasn't just about implementing new policies. Harper also wanted to address the underlying issues that led to bullies targeting vulnerable populations, such as those with mental health conditions or who struggle in social situations. She reached out to local advocacy groups and spoke to members of their board about her proposal for a comprehensive approach to tackling bullying. She explained how the focus would be on creating a safe and inclusive school environment where all students could thrive regardless of their background or identity. This would involve providing resources, training, and support for staff and faculty who were trained in identifying and addressing bullying behaviors. It would also include increased funding for mental health services, including counseling programs and crisis hotlines. The response to Harper's proposal was mixed at first. Some teachers believed that it was a good idea, but others raised concerns about the cost of implementing such changes and whether they could effectively address the root causes of bullying in the school community. But as she shared her vision for Blackstone Prep, Harper was able to convince them that this approach was necessary if they wanted to create a safe and inclusive environment where all students felt valued and supported. She explained how their efforts would not only help prevent future incidents of bullying, but also provide resources and support to those who had already been affected by it. Over the next few weeks, Harper continued her advocacy work with local advocacy groups, speaking at conferences and events about her proposal. Her message resonated with many people in the school community, including parents, teachers, administrators, and students themselves. Harper's efforts did not go unnoticed, and soon enough, she was invited to present her proposed solution at a town hall meeting for Blackstone Prep's board of directors. She opened her presentation by sharing how bullied students often felt invisible and excluded from the school community, leading to feelings of shame, isolation, and hopelessness. She then outlined her proposal in detail, highlighting its comprehensive approach that addressed not only bullying incidents, but also the underlying issues that led to it. From mental health services to policy changes, Harper emphasized the importance of creating a safe space where students felt heard, supported, and valued. The board members listened intently as Harper spoke, their faces softened by her passion for addressing this issue at Blackstone Prep. They were impressed with the potential impact that her proposal could have on preventing future incidents of bullying and ensuring a safer school environment. After much debate and discussion, the board agreed to take concrete steps towards implementing Harper's proposed solution. They allocated additional funding for mental health services, increased staff training in identifying and addressing bullies, and established an emergency hotline for students who needed support or resources related to this issue. In addition to these policy changes, the school also implemented new procedures around reporting bullying incidents. Students were now required to report any instances of violence or harassment anonymously through a confidential online form. This not only made it easier for those affected by bullying to seek help, but also sent a clear message that their voices mattered and had real consequences. As Harper stepped back from the boardroom, she felt a sense of pride in what they had accomplished. They had faced resistance at first, but with her proposal, they were able to create a safer school environment where all students could thrive and succeed. But there was still work to be done. As Harper looked out at Blackstone Prep's bustling lunchroom once again, she knew that the fight against bullying would never truly be over. She vowed to continue advocating for change, inspired by the bravery of those who had fought before her. For now, Harper turned to Jordan, and Jordan replied. "You know what?" he said, a small smile on his face as he looked at her with admiration. "You're right. It's not just about fixing one issue here. We have so much more work to do." Harper nodded in agreement, feeling grateful for the support of her friends and colleagues who had helped her make this proposal into a reality. Together, they knew that their work was only getting started, but with Harper at the helm and Jordan by her side, Blackstone Prep would become a safe haven where all students could grow and succeed. And as she walked out of the cafeteria once again, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead, Harper felt confident in her ability to make a difference for all. Chapter 1. The system. Harper Sinclair had always been a quiet, introverted student at Blackstone Prep. She didn't stand out in any particular way academically or socially, but she was content with her life and the friends who supported her. That all changed when she stumbled upon an unsettling fact about the school's lunchroom. One day, while sitting alone at the cafeteria table, Harper overheard a conversation between two bullies discussing their latest victim. They were talking about how one of them had been bullied by another student, and they suggested that the system was too weak to protect those in vulnerable positions like Harper. As she listened intently, Harper couldn't help but feel sickened by what she heard. She knew that there must be something wrong with the lunchroom's policies or procedures if such a thing could happen. She started researching the matter and soon discovered a disturbing pattern of abuse against female students at Blackstone Prep. According to her investigation, bullies had been targeting girls like Harper because they were perceived as less powerful than boys. Harper knew that she couldn't stay quiet about this issue any longer. With a sense of determination in her heart, she gathered the courage to share her findings with Jordan and other staff members at Blackstone Prep. They listened intently, processing the information for what felt like hours. As they shared their concerns, Harper realized that there was more than just bullying taking place on campus. The system needed reforming if it wanted to truly address this problem. She proposed a comprehensive plan involving increased security measures, improved reporting and support systems, and stricter consequences for perpetrators of violence against girls at Blackstone Prep. Jordan listened intently as she spoke, his expression grave. "This is something we can't afford," he said firmly. "We need a more robust system in place to ensure the safety of our students." Despite their concerns, Harper knew that change was needed if they wanted to see real progress. She had faced many challenges along the way but refused to give up on her dream for Blackstone Prep. With Jordan's support and encouragement, Harper began gathering resources and collaborating with other schools in the area to share ideas and best practices. They formed a coalition of organizations dedicated to fighting against bullying and promoting gender equality at all levels of education. Together, they conducted workshops and training sessions for teachers, administrators, and students on how to identify and report incidents of abuse, as well as strategies for preventing and responding to such situations effectively. As the awareness grew, more people began joining in their efforts, including other schools, community groups, and even local law enforcement agencies. With each step forward, Harper felt a sense of satisfaction knowing that she was making a difference. But there were still challenges ahead. The system needed time to adjust and adapt, and progress could be slow at times. But with determination and perseverance, Harper refused to let the bullies win. She continued to advocate for change by organizing school-wide assemblies, speaking out in local news outlets, and reaching out to influential figures in her community. As she worked tirelessly behind the scenes, Harper faced criticism from some who doubted the effectiveness of their efforts or saw it as a PR stunt rather than genuine action against bullying on campus. She refused to back down, knowing that change was only possible if everyone came together and supported each other. Despite the challenges, Harper remained focused on her goal. She knew that she had the power to make a difference in the lives of many girls like herself and ensure that Blackstone Prep became a shining example of what it meant to be safe and inclusive for all students. As the months passed, Harper watched as the STEM began to shift towards greater accountability and transparency. The school's leadership made changes to their policies and procedures, implemented new security measures, and increased support services for victims of bullying. Slowly but surely, Blackstone Prep became a safer place for girls like Harper, where they felt valued, respected, and heard. Students who had previously been targets began feeling more empowered to speak out against injustice and take action towards creating a better future. Harper's work wasn't just about changing the lunchroom at Blackstone Prep, but also addressing the broader societal issues of bullying and gender inequality in education. She knew that there was much work left to do, but with Jordan by her side and countless others dedicated to making a difference, she felt confident that they could make a lasting impact on the lives of all students. As she walked out of Blackstone Prep's bustling lunchroom once again, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead, Harper looked around at the faces of the students gathered in front of her. She knew that their fight against bullying had just begun and that there would be many more obstacles to overcome. But with determination, courage, and a deep commitment to creating a safer and inclusive school for all, Harper felt ready to take on whatever challenges lay ahead. The chain of violence continues. Harper Sinclair was a quiet scholarship girl at Blackstone Prep, a prestigious private school in the heart of New York City. Despite her privileged background and academic achievements, Harper felt like an outsider among her peers. She longed for belonging, but often found herself feeling unwelcome in the tight-knit community where everyone looked out for each other's well-being. One day, as she was waiting for lunch to begin at Blackstone Prep, Harper noticed 3 bullies cornering a shy girl named Emily. The girls were laughing and teasing her relentlessly, making it clear that they intended to humiliate her in front of the entire school community. Harper knew what she had to do. She had to speak up against this injustice. What would you do if power was used against you? Harper asked Jordan, a classmate who shared Emily's story with her. Her voice shook with determination as she continued. If someone were to harm me or my friends in the same way, what would we do? Would we turn and run? Or would we stand up for ourselves? Jordan paused, considering the question before answering. I think it depends on the situation, he said, his eyes narrowing slightly. But first, we need to understand that power isn't just about physical strength or aggression. It's also about who you believe in and what they allow. Harper nodded, her mind racing with 1,000 thoughts as she thought of Emily's experience. She had seen bullies at Blackstone Prep before, but this was the first time she realized how pervasive these issues were among students. Power can take many forms, Harper said, her voice growing louder and more confident. For example, it could be verbal abuse or physical harassment. It could also be manipulation or gaslighting to make someone feel like they're weak or insignificant. Jordan nodded in agreement before turning back to Emily. You've definitely seen power at work here, he said, his eyes scanning the faces of the students around them. Emily looked up at Jordan with a mixture of fear and determination. She knew that her story wasn't just about her, but also about others like her who had been targeted by bullies. But she was determined to make a change and stand up for what was right, no matter how difficult it might be. What are some strategies we can use to protect ourselves from these types of situations? Harper asked Jordan, hoping to get his ideas on the table before they were implemented. Jordan thought for a moment before answering. Firstly, it's important to know your boundaries and not tolerate any form of harassment or abuse. If you feel unsafe, speak up immediately and report the incident to a teacher or school administrator. Harper nodded in agreement as she realized that reporting was one way to protect herself from further harm. She also knew that being aware of potential predators or bullies could help her stay vigilant and avoid dangerous situations. Secondly, it's essential to have strong support systems, Jordan said, his voice dropping slightly. This can include friends, family members, or even a mentor who see and offer guidance and encouragement when needed. Harper nodded again as she understood the importance of having people in our lives who believe in us and stand by us during difficult times. What about school policies? Harper asked, her mind already turning to how Blackstone Prep could address this issue. Are there any programs or resources available that can help prevent bullying at school? Jordan looked thoughtful for a moment before answering. There are several initiatives in place at Blackstone Prep aimed at promoting inclusivity and addressing the root causes of bullying, he said, his voice rising slightly. We've implemented anti-bullying campaigns to raise awareness about these issues among students and teachers, Jordan explained. We also provide support groups for victims and allies who may be struggling with their own experiences. Harper nodded in agreement as she realized that Blackstone Prep was taking proactive steps towards creating a safe and supportive learning environment for all students, regardless of their background or status. But what about the wider society? Harper asked, her voice growing louder. If this is an issue affecting so many students across the country, how can we make a change on a larger scale? Jordan considered her question for a moment before answering. There are several ways that individuals and organizations can get involved in creating lasting change, he said, his eyes shining with pride. We can advocate for laws and policies that protect against bullying and promote inclusive education practices, Jordan explained. We can also raise awareness about the impact of bullying on mental health by supporting research studies or offering resources to schools. Harper nodded as she understood the importance of taking action at a systemic level to address this issue. She knew that it wouldn't be easy, but with Jordan's guidance and countless others dedicated to making a difference, they had the power to create lasting change. Let's do this, Harper said, her voice echoing across the lunchroom as she stood up and walked towards Emily. Together, we can make Blackstone Prep a safer and more inclusive place for all students. In the bustling cafeteria at Blackstone Prep, Harper Sinclair sat alone at a table by herself. The air was thick with tension as her classmates filed past, chatting and laughing. But there were two other girls in close proximity, Emily and Jordan, two standout students who had always been vocal about issues that mattered to them. As they reached the end of their second lunch period, Harper noticed Emily standing at a nearby shelf, browsing through an array of books on bullying and inclusion. Her face was etched with concern as she flipped through pages, her eyes scanning for any sign of distress or discomfort in others around her. Harper looked up from her book and saw Jordan sitting across the table, his piercing blue gaze fixed on Emily's every move. He had a twinkle in his eye that made Harper feel both intrigued and uneasy. She knew that this was something different from their usual interactions. Jordan always seemed to be one step ahead of them. "Hey," she said, trying to make her voice sound casual enough not to draw attention to themselves. "Mind if I join you?" Jordan turned around to face Harper with a smile on his lips. "Sure thing," he replied, his eyes narrowing slightly as he studied her for a moment before nodding in agreement. Together, they spent the next 10 minutes discussing ways to combat bullying and promote inclusive education practices at Blackstone Prep. They talked about the importance of school-wide policies that prioritize student well-being and address any instances of harassment or abuse. Harper explained how she had been bullied herself growing up, but it wasn't until her experiences as a scholarship applicant at Blackstone Prep led to her discovering an organization called Bullying Prevention League that she realized the severity of the issue. I started researching the impact of bullying on mental health and found countless studies linking it with higher rates of depression, anxiety, and academic struggles, Harper said. She shared stories from other students who had been affected by bullying, highlighting how these experiences can have a lasting impact on their lives. It's not just about physical harm. There are often emotional scars that linger for years. Jordan listened intently as Harper spoke, his eyes lighting up with interest at the severity of the issue. He knew firsthand how difficult it was to navigate through life while dealing with bullying and its consequences, but he also understood the importance of speaking out against it. "I know what you mean," Jordan said softly, his voice barely audible over the din of the cafeteria. "Bullying can be a devastating experience for anyone, regardless of their background or circumstances." Harper nodded in agreement as they continued to discuss potential solutions at Blackstone Prep. They talked about creating awareness campaigns that educate students on bullying and its impact, developing stricter disciplinary measures when incidents occur, and providing support services for bullied individuals. They also discussed the importance of encouraging empathy and understanding among peers who may be struggling with issues related to bullying or inclusion. Harper shared stories from her own experiences as a scholarship applicant and how those lessons had helped her navigate through challenging situations at school. "I remember sitting in my counselor's office when I was going through one particularly difficult time," she said, tears streaming down her face. "A student who had been bullied came to me for help, explaining that their grades started dropping due to the constant harassment from other students. But instead of turning him or her away, we talked about how they could make a difference in their own lives and start advocating against bullying." Jordan nodded thoughtfully as he listened, his eyes shining with pride at Harper's dedication to making a positive impact on others' lives. "Change starts with one person," Jordan said. "And it's not just Blackstone Prep where we can create change. We need to spread awareness about this issue across the country and work together to make schools safer for all students, regardless of their backgrounds or circumstances." Harper nodded in agreement as they continued their conversation, determined to bring about a lasting impact on bullying prevention at Blackstone Prep and beyond. As the lunch bell rang, Harper and Jordan turned away from Emily, each heading towards their respective meals. They knew that this wasn't an easy road ahead, but with the combined efforts of individuals like themselves, as well as organizations working tirelessly behind the scenes, they had a chance to create meaningful change for students who needed it most. For Harper Sinclair, the experience at Blackstone Prep was just another moment in her journey towards becoming a leader and advocating against bullying. She knew that she would never stop fighting until all schools across the country were safe and inclusive spaces for their students. And as they walked out of the cafeteria, with Jordan's words ringing in her ears, Harper felt a sense of pride and determination wash over her. The world was waiting for them to make it happen, and Harper knew that she had the power to be the change that needed to be made. With each step forward towards creating lasting impact on bullying prevention, Harper Sinclair proved herself as an unlikely hero, but also an inspiration to others everywhere. In the bustling cafeteria at Blackstone Prep, Harper Sinclair was waiting for her next meal. As she scanned the crowd of students and staff members passing by, she noticed a group of bullies cornering one of her closest friends, Emily, who had just arrived after school. "What are you doing here?" asked Jordan, a quiet girl with long, curly hair and piercing blue eyes. "It's not safe for me," replied Harper, maintaining her composure as the three bullies advanced towards them. I know that some people might think I'm weak or spineless, but there is a system in place at Blackstone Prep that needs to be changed. Jordan nodded thoughtfully, understanding the gravity of the situation. But how do we make it happen? She asked, her voice shaking slightly as Harper turned on her heels and ran towards the exits. We can't just ignore these bullies or hope they'll disappear on their own. I have a plan, said Harper, pulling out a small notepad from her pocket. She began writing down ideas for what could be done to create safer schools for all students. It starts with education, she continued. We need to raise awareness about the negative effects of bullying and teach young people how to identify and report it when they see something suspicious. Harper paused, taking a deep breath before continuing her lecture. We also need to have stricter consequences for those who engage in bullying behavior, she explained. That means not only punishing the perpetrator, but also educating them on the harmful impact their actions can have on others. Jordan listened intently as Harper spoke about creating a culture of empathy and kindness within Blackstone Prep, where everyone was valued regardless of their background or status. But what happens when those who are targeted by bullies are no longer in school? Jordan asked. How do we support them while also ensuring that the system remains effective? That's an excellent question, said Harper. She looked around at her fellow students and staff members, each with a different role to play in creating a safer environment for everyone. Community involvement is key, she added. We need to come together as a school community to provide support and resources to those affected by bullying. Jordan nodded thoughtfully, understanding the importance of collaboration across multiple sectors in addressing this complex issue. But how can we make sure that all students feel valued and included in this process? Jordan asked, her voice rising slightly with frustration. Well, replied Harper, we need to create a safe space for open communication between bullies and victims, where they can share their experiences without fear of judgment or retaliation. Jordan nodded, realizing the value of fostering an environment that encourages individuals to speak up when they witness bullying behavior. We also need to provide resources for students who have been affected by bullying, she continued. That could include counseling services, support groups, and mental health programs aimed at addressing the underlying emotional distress and trauma caused by these incidents. As Harper spoke about the various aspects of creating a safer school culture, Jordan listened intently, eager to learn more about how they would be implemented. We need to work with local organizations that specialize in bullying prevention, she said. These groups can provide training for teachers, counselors, and administrators on how to identify, prevent, and respond to bullies. Jordan nodded again, feeling grateful for the opportunity to collaborate with such dedicated professionals who are committed to creating a safer school community. But what about students themselves? Jordan asked, her voice tinged with concern. How do we ensure that they stay engaged and motivated in this process? Engagement is key, replied Harper. She smiled gently at Jordan before turning back to the group of bullies. We need to create a sense of purpose and belonging among our students by highlighting their strengths, accomplishments, and unique perspectives. Jordan nodded again, understanding the importance of fostering an inclusive culture that encourages student participation in creating change. Additionally, she added, her voice growing louder as Harper spoke more passionately, we need to highlight how bullying can have negative consequences on a person's physical and mental health. By acknowledging these risks early on, we can help students understand why they should be treated with respect and kindness. The group of bullies regarded each other suspiciously as Harper finished her speech, but Jordan could see the potential in their eyes. I know that this is a challenging issue, she said, placing a hand on Harper's shoulder. But I have faith in our ability to make a difference. Together, We can create a safe and inclusive school community where every student feels valued and respected." As Harper turned her back on the bullies, Jordan felt a sense of pride in knowing that she had played an essential role in bringing about change for those affected by bullying. The bell rang once more, signaling the end of Harper's speech. The cafeteria was now quiet once again as students and staff members, their thoughts turning to the upcoming challenges ahead. But with each step forward towards creating a safer school culture, Harper Sinclair proved herself as an unlikely hero, but also an inspiration to others everywhere. As she walked out of Blackstone Prep, surrounded by her friends and colleagues who shared her passion for making a difference in the lives of students like Emily, Harper knew that her journey had just begun. The global outline. Harper Sinclair, a quiet scholarship student at Blackstone Prep, was Sutta, NLY, cornered by 3 bullies who were targeting her for being perceived as different. As the cafeteria fell silent and silence replaced the usual commotion, Harper's mind raced with questions about what to do if she stood up against injustice. But here lies a twist. Harper wasn't just fighting back. She had uncovered a system that was fueling this bullying culture at Blackstone Prep. She knew from personal experiences growing up as an introverted and anxious student that the environment around her could be hostile for those who didn't conform to societal norms or expectations. With newfound determination, Harper began investigating these bullies' behavior by gathering evidence through conversations with teachers, students, and parents. They discovered a pattern of discrimination, prejudice, and manipulation in the school's policies, curriculum, and interactions among students and staff members. Recognizing that not only she but also her friends and allies at Blackstone Prep needed to take action against these bullies, Harper organized a student-led group called the Bullying Prevention League, which aimed to promote inclusivity, respect, and tolerance in the school community. The League's first meeting was attended by over 50 students, faculty members, and parents who shared their concerns about the bullying issue. Together, they brainstormed strategies for addressing the underlying causes of the problem, including advocating for stronger anti-bullying policies, promoting positive peer relationships among all students, providing emotional support to those affected, and fostering a safe space where everyone could feel comfortable expressing themselves without fear of judgment or discrimination. Harper's leadership skills quickly became evident as she rallied the League members, organizing campaigns that raised awareness about the issue through school events, social media posts, and community outreach. They also worked with local schools in nearby districts to create joint programs aimed at addressing bullying practices on a broader scale. As they continued their efforts, Harper noticed significant progress in changing the culture of Blackstone Prep. Students began treating each other more kindly. Teachers reported fewer instances of classroom conflicts, and parents became increasingly supportive of fostering inclusive environments for all students. However, not everyone was convinced that Harper's actions were enough to solve the problem completely. Some faculty members were hesitant about introducing a new curriculum or changing school policies due to concerns around cultural sensitivity and potential backlash from certain groups within Blackstone Prep. Undeterred by these challenges, Harper remained committed to her mission of fighting against bullying at Blackstone Prep. She continued networking with other schools, sharing their successes and best practices in addressing the issue, and even invited experts and professionals who could provide valuable insights into creating a more inclusive and supportive learning environment. As she watched the school evolve over time, Harper knew that her journey had not just been about preventing bullying, but also fostering empathy, understanding, and resilience among students.